Okay, over to you, Francis.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this 84th webinar on the Secret Doctrine. This completes 7 years that we've been doing this. Can you believe it, BL?
Wow. No.
I know. So this webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheading Mori Federation Webinars, then webinar series in progress, as shown here. All episodes of this, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, and a treatise on cosmic fire series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar series you wish to view. You can also access any of these webinars on the home page of MoriFederation.com, as you can see here. Just click on those and you're in. Okay, this month in Old Diary Leaves, Colonel Olcott conducts experiments in psychometry. With the psychometry is the sense of touch on the astral. Higher psychometry is the sense of touch on the mental plane. With the passengers of the sailing ship Arcadia during his return journey to Bombay, India. Could we get a reader, please?
I'll start. As the Arcadia did not sail until 10 p.m., we had from her deck the chance to see the lovely panorama of the illuminated city of Naples mirrored in the glassy waters of the bay, a fairy scene. The homeward voyage proved most interesting, as a great desire to know something about theosophy, the society, and occult sciences generally was shown by the passengers of both salons. Among them was the gracious student of the mystical subjects, the Countess of Jersey, whom I found one of the most high-minded, pleasantest acquaintances I've ever made. Doubtless, as a consequence of her example, the whole first saloon fell to talking about psychometry, thought transference, clairvoyance, palmistry, astrology, and similar topics of the borderland group. And practical experiments were made to test the correctness of theories. On the fourth day out, I received an invitation in writing from Lord Jersey, Sir Samuel W. Baker, the African explorer, and other notables on behalf of the saloon passengers, and with the captain's consent to lecture on theosophy, which I gladly did.
Okay, saloon in those days was just like a lounge, large lounge on these ships. Okay, next reader, please.
Rudy, can you read that for us, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
3 days later, there was another call upon me, and I took by request the subject of psychometry. This set many to making experiments, and I myself made some that were instructive. A certain lady brought from her cabin a half-dozen letters from persons of widely different characters, each enclosed in a plain envelope, so that the experimenter might get no clue whatsoever to the sex or character of the writer, a clever precaution. I made her sit in an easy chair and passed the letters one by one over her head to her forehead, where I bade her hold them and answer my questions. She was not to stop and think what the answer ought to be, but just to say the first thing that came to her mind. I asked her, "Is the writer a man or a woman?" "Answer quickly, please." Then I asked, "Is he or she old or young? Tall or short? Stout or thin? healthy or ill, hot-tempered or calm, frank or deceitful, generous or miserly, worthy or unworthy of trust as a friend. Do you like this person, etc., etc. Never putting a leading question or doing anything to confuse the spontaneous thought of the subject.
Thank you. Next up.
Tom, can you read that for us, please? Tom?
Yes. Now, at first blush, it is perfectly plain that the closest scrutiny of the blank envelope, unless its shape were an unusual one associated with a certain correspondent, would reveal nothing as of the sex, age, complexion, form, or mental or moral characteristics of the writer of the enclosed letter. First Lady Experimenter proved herself devoid of the psychometric faculty, but another lady who next submitted herself to the test was successful in 5 out of 7 cases. Has subsequently verified in opening the covers, and First Lady's brother, an army officer and a rather flippant critic of the science, found to his amazement that he could psychometrize, and the rumor of these instructive experiments running through the ship caused the invitation to make my second lecture on the subject of Professor Buchanan's discovery.
Next, okay, next up, finally.
Joe, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. A well-known member of Parliament gave very correct delineations in 2 cases submitted to him for psychometric reading. The scientific and practical value of the possession of this sense is evident, inasmuch as it arms a person with a super-refined faculty of feeling the true character and motive of a correspondent, or of one with whom one is talking, or whom one meets in the world, whatever mask may be used in the letter or put on the face of the individual. Then again, the developed psychometer ought naturally to be intuitive, for learning the sense of an author and reading the meaning of a public lecturer, despite his, perhaps, clumsy way of putting things. It makes one instantaneously responsive to appeals to the higher nature and guarded against being carried away by the sophistries of those who would deceive and cajole one with evil designs.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, so I thought particularly interesting about this was, Colonel Olcott did a lot of experiments on different psychic qualities, but this idea that psychometry would make you aware of the true character of and motive of a correspondent, I thought was quite interesting. So it's not just about identifying, some of the questions like, is he tall or short or male or female, etc. But, the more going deeper into that, being able to feel the nature of someone just by their correspondence. Anyway, this month, we began our last session by taking a look at HPV's commentary on the last half of verse 7 of stanza 6, shown here, which reads, Reach the fourth fruit of the fourth path of knowledge that leads to nirvana, and thou shalt comprehend, for thou shalt see. Here we learned about the 4 grades of initiation, which lead to nirvana, called Skrotapana, Sagardagan, Anagamin, and Arhan, or Arhat. Each of these grades, these are Theravada Buddhist initiations. Each of these grades is associated with overcoming one or more of the 10 fetters to enlightenment, which are, let's say, oops, I didn't go through these as I was showing you. Here we go. So the 10 fetters are Sakaya Ditti, belief in a permanent self, Vikikicha, doubt or uncertainty, especially regarding the Buddha's teachings, or I suppose any authority's teachings. Sila Bhatta Paramasa, attainment to rites and rituals. Kamachanda, sensual desire. Vyapada, ill will. Rupa Raga, craving for fine material existence, passion for form. Arupa Raga, craving for immaterial existence, passion for what is formless. Mana, conceit. And Udhaksha, restlessness. And finally, Avidya, which is ignorance. So there's a loose correlation between these 4 stages that I just showed you here. These 4 stages. And the first 4 initiations described by DK, though there is much variation between Buddhism and Theosophy as to the particular qualities gained at each initiation. Of course, on the inner side, they would be identical. It would just be a cultural thing that would change the outer qualifications of these initiations. Okay, the phrase, the 4 paths to nirvana, in this, our 4th round, bearing the same appellations, is interesting. It suggests that there's a relationship between the first 4 rounds of this chain and these 4 stages of initiation, even to the point that the rounds bear the same name. It makes you wonder if it's each of these initiations, does it represent a threshold of becoming for a particular round, with our 4th round finally allowing for this highest stage, or for a much greater percentage of this Arhat stage to come forth. And then we can extrapolate from that the idea that in the next round, for instance, there would be a further initiation. We know from DK, that's the Master of Wisdom, that would be a much more common stage of becoming in that round. HPB then tells us that, quote, the Arhan, though he can see the past, the present, and the future, is not yet the highest initiate. For the adept himself, the initiated candidate, becomes Chela, which is pupil, to a higher initiate. This is also pretty close to DK's teachings. Seeing the past, present, and future is called by DK continuity of consciousness, which is realized at the 3rd initiation and perfected at the 4th. We then learned that initiates always stand in advance of the average ascetic, who will catch up in the next or following root race. A lot of correlation between stages of initiation and the root races in these writings. HPB next describes the Arhats of the fire mist, which DK calls initiates of the 7th degree, because they work on the Uti subplane of the cosmic physical plane in association with Shambhala, called by HPB the root base of their hierarchy, the highest on Earth. The metaphor given for this root base is the ever-living human banyan, which represents the interconnectedness between all Earth beings, from least to greatest, that make up the manifested, differentiated reality of the planetary logos. Did you call on me? I heard a voice.
Yeah, I heard it too, and I wasn't paying attention. Ariane has a question.
Okay. Ariane, yes.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. I attended very few of these 7 years of this discourse, and I'm just a beginner, but and I missed last time. But I wanted to ask, I think that the planet Earth is in its fourth round also, and we're supposed to be undergoing or being in the process of the Earth's changing its level of initiation, spiritual initiation and development at this time. And I'm just wondering how that relates to the other things you said today. And then I have one other remark, a brief remark.
Yeah, you're right. It's we're in our fourth round and the fifth root race of this round. And of course, there's always a number of correlation, between initiations, between rounds, between races or sub-races of the human race. And so there will, for instance, the Master DK took his initiation in 1875 during this fifth, which is the fifth initiation, during this fifth subrace of the Aryan root race. And my guess is that, and that itself is the fifth race. And my guess is that there will be many more masters of wisdom taking initiation during the fifth race, but many, many more during the next round, when it will be much more like what is now occurring in the lower initiations, second and third initiations, because again, the number correspondence. If you had another
Yeah, I have so many. That's feeding me with other questions from what you just said. So you just said, am I correct, that DK took his fifth initiation in 1875?
Yeah, that's right.
So recently, and he was the major intermediary because he was so close to humanity through Alice Bailey and humanity. He is so recently a master. Is that part of the reason he was chosen to be the intermediary?
Well, I think the true intermediary is Alice Bailey. I mean, it started with who we're studying now, which is Blavatsky, and DK also worked with her. In fact, her first great opus, Isis Umbeo, came out in 1875. Seems likely that's no coincidence. And then the Secret Doctrine, which we're studying now, came out in 1888. And he also works with her, but not exclusively. There were 5 other helpers for the masters that worked with her at that time. But with Alice Bailey, DK worked exclusively, and she had a very, very, very different character, much more second ray, so there was a much stronger alignment. HPB had a lot of first ray, so there was a uniquely in sync alignment. In fact, she was you could say, temporarily lent from the ashram of Kuthumi. She's not even a part of Dwakul's ashram, at least she wasn't when she first took on this work, because she had this extraordinarily unique gift that allowed her to, take down, very accurately through thought impression, the words of the Master Decay.
Yeah, well, let me explain how I use the word intermediary. And you're right. It's a better word for Alice A. Bailey. I was using it because when one is like in a spiritual community, like in mine or yours, people have different roles as they do in the hierarchy. And some people have on the outskirts of a community who are less evolved in relationship to the higher evolved beings in the community, whether it's the Masters of Wisdom or so the ageless wisdom groups that we're a part of, that they have a role that's more public with the outskirts.
Right.
So it's different. Like say the new group of world servers, the masters who are working individually with them would be different than say someone who is like working more in media, which has a much broader base. So that was why I used the word intermediary, because I was, and then I want to say about that is that in relationship to my first question about the earth going through its fourth round, what interests me now is that more people, like a broader brushstroke again, like a huge ocean of spiritual development that people are swimming in, despite the tensions of political, conflict we face now, that you see that there might be an accelerated spiritual development for more people. And I'm wondering how that relates exactly to the Earth's fourth round. And then I just have one very small comment, but that was the original question.
Okay. I think that has a lot more to do with the coming in of the Aquarian age. That, as Ray 6 gives way and Ray 7 begins to exert its influence, that that's one of the rays that's very much a part of initiation, because it grounds spirit and matter, which is really what initiation is, right? So as we approach the Aquarian age, there will be, I think, more and more people taking initiation, more and more people stepping onto the path of return. And also, the exact same causes are creating the turmoil that we see, because it's the last gasp of the Piscean agenda, you could say, the Piscean ray influence. And those that are oriented to that expression are feeling the end times. And so they're very much, even though, it's really just the end of an era, not the end altogether. And so they are entrenching. And, we see that very much in the conservative politics, really throughout the world,
But they may not be allowed to graduate. What I wanted to say though is how much of it is coming from the earth and how much of it is coming from the cosmic energies that you just referred to. Like if the earth is in the fourth round and it's going into its own initiatory process, does that not have an impact for all of us, all humanity, all life forms? And you're saying that the cosmic influences are even greater than that. Is that your point?
Well, I didn't say cosmic influences. If by that you mean the influences of well, you're right. You're right. The Aquarian age is a cosmic influence, so that is correct. Well, the fourth round, has been with us for quite a while now. It's been 23 million years since humanity became individualized just on this globe, right? And the round includes, we're the fourth globe of this round. And so it's already included 3 other globes and will include 3 more globes. So it's, from our perspective, an absolutely enormous cycle of time, right? For us, it's more the ages, because they come every 2,160 years, give or take, and the root race, the sub races of the root races that tend to give us energetic patterns that we can track. And the changes that we see come more from those sources than from the fourth round itself, which, like I said, is it's a period of hundreds of millions of years.
I see. So now I want to make a very brief comment because I don't want to hog the time. So if we go back to the earlier slides where you showed these pictures of supposed initiates meeting, you had lists of things that you needed to overcome. Yeah, that one maybe, and these are like going, acquiring and overcoming these vices. But I wanted to go to the cities. There was one that seemed to refer to strengths, was there not?
This is all 10 of them. I
Yeah.
mean, part of them are represented on these earlier slides, but they're all brought together in this slide. So I'm not sure which one.
Yeah. So basically, just the quick point I wanted to make is that we confuse, and it's sort of like the reason why it's such a danger and deviation is that as we become more evolved, our senses become much more refined and attuned. And you can see that's true for all of us in this room, very interested in the brilliance of these writings and also the art that you share with us. And also, that's not consciousness. And because when we become more evolved, part of it is that the instrument that we have, which is our functions, our senses, and also our mind, as they attribute in India as one of the senses, becomes much more profoundly developed, much more sensitive, expansive, and inclusive. We can misconstrue that as something like a heightened sense of consciousness or self-realization, and it's not. It's actually, it's like just like a perk of our evolution. It is not what we're aiming at, in the sense that we have to go beyond all those things. And here he's talking about like the traps that one could get into, like sensual desire that's related to a restlessness. Those are related to desire, and even these kind of CDs or attuned, the brilliance of someone who's a genius in any field, who's an expert in any field, which some of us here may be or may not. And to go beyond that and try right now at this moment to be more aware, that's a totally different effort. And I just wanted to remind everyone of that and remark on that. That's all.
Okay. Well, thanks for our little discussion. I enjoyed that. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, let's get back to where we were. I think we were at the tree. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going through the review of what we looked at last time. Next, we learned about Sanat Kumara, described in the Secret Doctrine only as the, quote, wondrous being. He's not given a name here. No, he's mentioned, but he's not mentioned as the planetary logos. Also about the third root race, whose members were called the sons of passive yoga, because it was produced unconsciously by the second root race. Then HPB states, in the first or earlier portion of the existence of the third race, while it was yet in its state of purity, the sons of wisdom, who, as will be seen, incarnated in this third race, who, as produced by Kriya Shakti, a progeny called the sons of Ad, A-D, or of the fire mist, the, quote, sons of will and yoga, which we discover in the following passage was not really a race at all, but was rather, quote, at first a wondrous being called the initiator, and after him a group of semi-divine and semi-human beings. It was this group that set up Earth's hierarchy 18 million years ago. HPB then informs us, quote, the being just referred to, which has to remain nameless, is the tree from which in subsequent ages all the great historically known sages and hierophants, such as the Rishi Kapila, Hermes, Enoch, Orpheus, etc., have branched off. This list would include the avatars of each age, up to and including the Buddha and the Christ. This great group, which has its roots in those that accompanied Sanat Kumara from the Venus chain and globe, Venus chain, Venus globe of our scheme, and which HPB tells us was not one of the numbered strictly human races, has and will make possible the lifting of humanity into soul consciousness. HPB then continues describing the quote-unquote nameless one, saying, quote, he is the initiator, called the great sacrifice, for sitting at the threshold of light, he looks into it from within the circle of darkness, which he will not cross, nor will he quit his post till the last day of this life cycle. So of course, it's light and darkness are all relative for such a great being as the great sacrifice. Darkness is all aspects of the cosmic physical plane, that which we strive for, which is awareness on the higher subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, would for the planetary logos be considered darkness, because he's been there, done that. It's time to move into the light of the cosmic astral plane, but for his own continuation on the path. But he stands within the darkness in order to help those who are progressing through that threshold. And this takes us up to where we left off last time. So we'll continue with HPB's description of Sanat Kumara. Why does the solitary watcher remain at his self-chosen post? Why does he sit by the fountain of primeval wisdom, of which he drinks no longer, as he has not to learn, which he does not know? I, neither on this earth nor in its heaven. So that's the question. So Earth's quote-unquote heaven is made up of the four cosmic ethers, the Adi-monadic, Atmic, and Buddhic planes. Sanat Kumara's sacrifice comes to the fact that he has inextricably tied his destiny to all sentient forms that make up the multi-level layers of Earth's manifestation. He himself is one of 343 logoi who has or will represent the logos of the Earth scheme. Finally, HPB answers the question about why Sanat Kumara remains at his self-chosen post. Because the lonely, sore-footed pilgrims on their way back to their home are never sure to the last moment of not losing their way in this limitless desert of illusion and matter called Earth life. DK expands on this idea in Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 1. Could we get a reader, please?
And Veronica, can you read that for us, please?
Hello. Do you hear a noise?
A
Can
little
you
background,
hear
but
me?
not. We can hear you, and there's a little background noise, but not much.
Okay, I will go to the other room. At this time, the eye of his direction is turned towards a needy and waiting world, and particularly towards the large number of waiting people who hold within themselves the potencies of discipleship. They are the hope of the world. This outpouring of directed energy means a great stimulation of all sensitive and responsive aspirants. The result is not an easy one for them. Everything in them is raised to the surface of consciousness, and whilst they are faced with a vital and beneficent opportunity, they are also faced with the problem of absorbing more punishment. Is not that the word I want, my brother? Then they would normally take. Will they break under the impact of self-discovery and the opportunity to eliminate personality, or will they rise triumphant from the ashes of their dead selves into living power and beauty? With Sanat Kumara, though Sanat Kumara is naturally unaware of the individual disciple or aspirant, he is not unaware of the massed effect, quality, or status. Contact and relationship are based upon vibratory reaction and the potency of the united vibration of the disciple and aspirants of the world is today, for the first time in human history, strong enough to reach Shambhala. This is a new and very interesting fact.
Thank you, Anne Veronica.
Thank you.
And another reader, please.
Sam, can you read that for us, please?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
In this great judgment, all decisions lies in the conclusive thinking of Sanat Kumara. It is his judgment, neither the sheep nor the goats, nor the great mass of men from among whom they have emerged can affect the decision in slightest degree. Any moment or climax of decision on the part of the Lord of the world institutes new land and brings into play new energies. Laws are only the unadulterable conditions brought about by the activity, the orientation, and the emanated decisive thoughts of the one in whom we live and more and have one being, just as the activities, the orientation, and the thinking of the human being carry the cells and the atoms of his body along the line of his wishes. The energies are but the rhythm of his breathing and the result of systolic and diastolic actions of his heart. From these energy we cannot escape, but in a mysterious and peculiar manner, the planetary logos directs them or withholds them to suit the recognized planetary needs of the period. Dina 162.3.
Thank you, Sam. Okay. Next up, can we get a reader, please?
Maria, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Because he would fain show the way to that region of freedom and light, from which he is a voluntary exile himself, to every prisoner who has succeeded in liberating himself from the bonds of flesh and illusion. Because, in short, he has sacrificed himself for the sake of mankind, though but a few elect may profit by the great sacrifice. It is under the direct, silent guidance of this Maha Great Guru that all the other less divine teachers and instructors of mankind became, from the first awakening of human consciousness, the guides of early humanity. It is through these sons of God that infant humanity got its first notions of all the arts and sciences, as well as of spiritual knowledge. And it is they who have laid the first foundation stone of those ancient civilizations that puzzle so sorely our modern generation of students and scholars.
Thank you. Okay, first, because he would fain show the way to that region of freedom and light, Remember before we read that he stands on the periphery of darkness, within the darkness, at the very edge of where the light continues. So because he would fain show the way to that region of freedom and light from which he is a voluntary exile himself, to every prisoner who has succeeded in liberating himself from the bonds of flesh and illusion, because, in short, he has sacrificed himself for the sake of mankind, though but a few elect may profit by the great sacrifice. So even though only a few, and this would be the very, very highest stages of initiation for a human being that would be able to cross into this threshold of light, which would be the cosmic astral plane. Among the quote-unquote few elect who profit from Sanat Kumar's great sacrifice are those Chohans who take one of the 7 paths that eventually lead beyond the cosmic physical plane. Sanat Kumara took the 3rd of these 7 paths, called the path of training for planetary logos, or logoi, eons ago, and now holds the door open for those now ready to leave the ring past knot of Earth's influence. This will, very, very, very few at this stage are at the stage where they are ready to do this. For instance, the Buddha is right on the brink of that, moving into the next realm. The Christ, after being an avatar for this coming age, will also move into the later stages of the 7th initiation, which will compel him to move across this threshold, right? So it's quite rare at this point, but later in the unfolding of the Earth scheme, it will become increasingly more common. Okay, next up. It is under the direct, silent guidance of this Maha, great guru, that all the other less divine teachers and instructors of mankind became, the first awakening of human consciousness, the guides of early humanity. In Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 1, DK asks the question, can you grasp anything of what I mean when I say that initiation is a planetary activity based on the life of the planetary logos and the point of spiritual attainment of Sanat Kumara? This attainment sweeps or carries the initiate into ever-widening spheres of lighted consciousness. And this makes him not only welcome the revelations of light, but also to become one of the agents of that light. And finally, it is through these sons of God that infant humanity got its first notions of all the arts and sciences, as well as of spiritual knowledge. And it is they who have laid the first foundation stone of those ancient civilizations that puzzle so sorely our modern generation of students and scholars. An example of an avatar that quote unquote laid the first foundation stone was Hermes Trismegistus, who, at least in this root race, who expanded greatly the knowledge of geometry, arithmetic, alchemy, astrology, theology, and philosophy for the Egyptian people, which then spread all around the Mediterranean. In Edward Carpenter's book, Pagan and Christian Creeds, Their Origin and Meaning, which Alice Bailey quotes in her book From Bethlehem to Calvary, we are given a partial list of the quote-unquote sons of God that HPB's been talking about, at least those who appeared before the time of Christ. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Yes, Ariane, please ask your question, and then if you'll read that passage for us.
All right. So this reveals my level of attachment. When we say that Buddha and Maitreya are going to evolve to the point where they're not going to be on this planet anymore, that creates fear, actually. And I know that supposedly John, the one who is Jesus' beloved, is maybe he's the one who's going to replace Maitreya, if I'm not wrong. But who and what is going to replace, if anything, Buddha? Because he has a very specific and different energy. He's the wisdom aspect, and it would seem like if he were to leave our planet entirely, our planet would just lose so much of what is the best of our understanding of what it means to pursue that aspect of the second ray, not just the love, but the wisdom aspect.
Yeah, well, I don't know who's directly in line for the Buddha. We know that the Christ, that the next Bodhisattva, which is the world teacher, will be Kuthumi, who's actually in line. If you look at the charts that appear in a treatise on cosmic fire, you'll see that his ashram is next in line to that of the Christ. Just how the Buddha fits into what you might call hierarchical unfoldment is not specified by DK. So I don't know how that will, but he's already mostly not involved in the Earth scheme. He's sort of famously said that he turns towards Earth at the time of the Wesak full moon, the exact moment of the full moon, for 8 minutes. And this was back in the 20s, 30s, 40s. We don't know if that's still true or if he's been replaced. But I'm sure that those who will take his place will continue, his very particular effort and vibratory quality. It's not a completely satisfactory answer, but that's what I have on that. Joe?
And I'm going to talk.
Yeah, that's why we called on you.
I'm speaking to my son who's enjoying what you're saying. I want to go back to the word feign. I just, I said, what on earth is that one? And so I looked it up, and it says as an adjective, pleased or willing under the circumstances. And the example is the traveler was fain to proceed. And then I look at the verb, and it's with pleasure, gladly. And the example is, I am weary and would fain get a little rest. But really, I got to thinking about Sanat Kumara beginning all those eons ago, sitting at the right hand of God, if you will, or he himself is God for us, and fain to make sure that every single one of us gets a chance at going on the full length of the path. It's just a subject of great joy, and Ariadne is really hitting on it as well, I think.
Yeah, I found that to be true too. Oh, thanks for that, Joe. The etymology of the word feign. It's also interestingly spelled differently. Fane is a temple, So you wonder if those two aren't connected. Okay, anyone else?
Tom, was it you who had your hand up? Somebody else had their hand up and I don't see it anymore.
I think it was Tom.
Yeah. I was just thinking that Buddha, like the Maitreya Christ, aren't they part of the cosmic organization? So there have already been many Buddhas and there will be many Buddhas. So it's a kind of machinery that is producing also always somebody who is needed.
Right. It's an unbroken chain. And, we have to drop this idea of personality, of a Buddha. They belong to these greatly potent groups of beings. And there's, the face of that group changes, but the potency is ever present. You can put it that way. It's hard for us to really understand that, but yeah, these great beings are far, far beyond any kind of personality expression. Anyone else?
Yeah, we have a couple of comments. I'd just like to say, Ariane, I think of it in terms of the soul, okay? Our mission here in life, our planet's mission here in life, our solar system's mission in life is to be imbued with both aspects of love wisdom, okay? That the Buddha teaches and that the Christ teaches. And when we learn that lesson, we're to move on, just like with the soul. Once we reach the soul, once we reach all the petals of the egoic lotus and the jewel inside, it's uh, destroyed as we move up because we've done that work. So that's what I'm thinking of in terms of everybody moving up. And yes, they're replaced with other great beings because those are positions. It's all part of the grand scheme of things. Okay, now Magda says Buddha was infused into Master Jesus at his birth, and Zarathustra at age of 12 at the episode of getting lost and separated from his parents. Steiner tells exactly what rays and energy paths are involved in the Golgotha's event that saved the fourth subrace by bringing down the colors. Also, the Nathanic Jesus included the spirit of the Solomonic, Jesus 12, Jesus at 12.
Thank you, Magda. Okay, could we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Ariane.
The number of pagan deities, mostly virgin-born, and done to death in some way or other in their efforts to save mankind, is so great as to be difficult to keep account of. The god Krishna in India, the god Indra in Nepal and Tibet, spilt their blood for the salvation of men. Buddha said, according to Max Mueller, let all the sins that were in the world fall on me, that the world may be delivered. The Chinese Tian, the Holy one with God and existing with Him from all eternity, died to save the world. The Egyptian Osiris was called Savior. So was Horus. So was the Persian Mithra. So was the Greek Hercules, who overcame death through his body, though his body was consumed in the burning garment of mortality, out of which he rose into heaven. So also was the Phrygian Attis, called Savior, and the Syrian Tammuz, or Adonis, likewise, both of whom, as we have seen, were nailed or tied to a tree, and afterwards rose again from their biers or coffins. Prometheus, the greatest and earliest benefactor of the human race, was nailed by the hands and the feet, and with arms extended to the rocks of Mount Caucasus. Bacchus or Dionysus, born of the Virgin Semele, to be the liberator of mankind. Dionysus, Eleutherios, as he was called, was torn to pieces, not unlike Osiris. Even in far Mexico, Quetzalcoatl, the Savior, was born of a virgin, was tempted, and fasted 40 days, was done to death, and his second coming looked for so eagerly that, as is well known, when Cortez appeared, the Mexicans, poor things, greeted him as the returning God. In Peru and among the American Indians, north and south of the equator, similar legends are or were to be found.
Thank you, Adrian. Yeah, I'm seeing here because I included this page number that this is where this quote can be found in Alice Paley's autobiography. But the quote is from this book, Pagan and Christian Creeds and Their Origins, page 20 and 21. Okay.
Francis,
Yeah.
I just want to say Anne Veronica says Eleutheros means free.
Oh, yeah. That's great. Thank you. Okay. Next up, let's take a look at the long footnote referenced by the phrase, our modern generations of students and scholars. Could we get a reader, please?
Marguerite, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Let those who doubt this statement explain the mystery of the extraordinary knowledge possessed by the ancients, alleged to have developed from lower and animal-like savages, the cavemen of the Paleolithic age, or any other equally reasonable grounds. Let them turn to such works as those of Vitruvius Polio of the Augustan age, on architecture, for instance, in which all the rules of proportion are those taught anciently at initiations. If he would acquaint himself with the truly divine art and understand the deep esoteric significance hidden in every rule and law of proportion, no man descended from a Paleolithic cave dweller could ever evolve such a science unaided, even in millenniums of thought and intellectual evolution. It is the pupils of those incarnated rishis and devas of the third root race who handed their knowledge from one generation to another, to Egypt and Greece, and with its now lost canon of proportion, as it is the disciples of the initiates of the fourth, the Atlanteans, who handed it over to the Cyclopes, the sons of Cycles, or of the infinite, from whom the name passed to the still later generations of the Gnostic priests.
Thank you. Okay, so this whole footnote, which continues on the next page, is all about examples of types of science, art, spiritual wisdom that was given as a result of these avatars that you could say act as intermediaries for humanity. They taught humanity these. So, and this footnote is all about examples of this. So first we have, let those who doubt this statement explain the mystery of the extraordinary knowledge possessed by the ancients, alleged to have developed from lower and animal-like savages, the caveman of the Paleolithic age, on any other equally reasonable ground. So HPB here gives us a key tenet of the ageless wisdom, which stands at odds with anthropological teaching. As shown in the quote from Edward Carpenter's book, the guiding principles of every root race, subrace, and civilization have been set in motion by greater or lesser sons of God who have incarnated for the specific purpose of furthering the manifestation of some aspect of these guiding principles. Next, let them turn to such works as those of Vitruvius Pollio of the Augustan age, on architecture, for instance, in which all the rules of proportions are those taught anciently at initiations. If he would acquaint himself with the truly divine art and understand the deep esoteric significance hidden in every rule and law of proportion. So here's a modern edition of Vitruvius Pollio's De Architectura, which outlines the following rules or proportions. And I think this is actually worth reading. Keep in mind as we're doing it that these are divine principles given to initiates of the age in order to ground the divine principle in physical form. So could we get a reader for this, please? Somebody that's good with Greek. I mean, with not Greek, but with Latin.
Magda,
Yeah,
can you read?
firmitas,
Go ahead.
firmitas utilitas venustas. Vitruvius emphasized that all buildings should embody three essential qualities: strength, firmitas; utility, utilitas; and beauty, venustas. Symmetry and proportion. He stressed the importance of symmetry and proportion in architecture, drawing parallels between the proportion of the human body and those of buildings. This concept is famously illustrated by Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. The 6 principles of design. Vitruvius identified 6 fundamental principles of design. Order, ordinatio, the arrangement of parts in a coherent and logical manner. Arrangement, dispositio, the proper placement of elements within a design. Proportion, eurythmia, harmonious and aesthetically pleasing relationships between parts. Symmetry, symmetria, balanced and proportional relationships between elements. Property, decor, appropriateness of design elements to their context and function. And economy, distributio, efficient and effective use of resources. Modular design. Vitruvius advocated for the use of modular design, where the dimensions of a building are based on a standard unit of measurement, ensuring consistency and harmony throughout the structure.
Thank you, Magda. Any thoughts or questions about this?
Well, you haven't gotten to that part in the passage that you were just describing before we moved off on here. But Anne Veronica said that the Cyclops had one eye in the myths and that they are not very intelligent.
Yeah, that's the myth. We're going to talk about Cyclops in a minute. So, yeah. Okay. The important point here is that this canon of proportion was bestowed by the masters of the race, and that the incarnated initiates who employ them, whether ancient India, ancient Egypt, or medieval France, where the cathedrals were built, were adepts in these arts. Okay, next up. No man descended from a Paleolithic cave dweller who could ever evolve such a science unaided, even in millenniums of thought and intellectual evolution. It is the pupils of those incarnated rishis and devas of the third root race who handed their knowledge from one generation to another. So, Light of the Soul lists the vertical line of descent in which these incarnated rishis and devas can be found. So this is, you could look at this as how these great disciplines, arts, sciences, spiritual knowledge, came to us. Could we get a reader, please?
Yes. Nadel, can you read that for us, please?
I'll try. I'm on a cell phone. All the learners and all teachers differing only in degree of realization. For instance, aspirants to the path are disciples of lesser disciples. Probationers on the path are disciples of higher ones. Accepted disciples are the disciples of an adept and of a master. An adept is the disciple of a master. A master is a disciple of a Mahatma. The Mahatmas are the disciples of still higher initiates. These in turn are the disciples of the Christ and of that official who is at the head of the teaching department. The head of the teaching department is a disciple of the Lord of the world. The Lord of the world is a disciple of one of these planetary spirits who represents the three major aspects. These are again disciples of the solar logos.
Thank you. Okay, so it's not just one avatar who comes and directly teaches. Such an avatar uses this line of descent. It's actually kind of in reverse here. Usually it's high to low. So a master would come in and teach his lesser initiate disciples, who would then teach ever greater widening circles of groups, right, down to aspirants on the path. So, okay, next up. To Egypt and Greece, with its now lost canon of proportion. So let's see, finish this sentence. He says, it is the peoples of those incarnate rishis and devas of the third root race who handed their knowledge from one generation to another to Egypt and Greece with its now lost canon of proportion, ... So the canons of proportion in ancient Egypt and Greece were foundational to their respective artistic and architectural traditions. For example, in ancient Egypt, the canon determining any and every depiction of the gods was made up of a strict set of guidelines used to ensure consistency and harmony. The system was based on a grid of 18 squares high with specific body parts aligned to certain grid lines. In ancient Greece, the canon of proportion was famously articulated by the sculptor Polykleitos in his treatise, The Canon. Although the original text is lost, it is known that Polykleitos proposed a mathematical approach to achieving ideal human proportions that has been successfully reverse engineered. We can determine what he wrote by reverse engineering the sculptures he made. His most famous work, shown here, the Doryphoros, spear bearer, exemplifies these principles. The Greeks also had an architectural canon exemplified by the proportions of the Parthenon at Athens. Okay, finally, it is the disciples of the initiates of the fourth, the Atlanteans, who handed it over to their cyclopes, the sons of cycles, or of the infinite, from whom the name passed to the still later generation of Gnostic priests. Okay, so it is the disciple of the initiates, is the ageless wisdom of the rishis carried by the White Brotherhood from the sinking shores of Atlantis east to the Mediterranean, west to the Yucatan Peninsula, and north to England. The phrase sons of cycles refers to the Neronic cycle of 600 years, possibly suggesting that the Cyclops were believed to live this long, 600 years. The association of the Cyclops with the quote unquote infinite points to their being identified with the three Kabiri. Can we get a reader, please?
Okay. Before I do that, Joe says, it occurs to me that there are 6 principles presented in the architectural comments, and the 7th would be the synthesis of the prior 6.
Yeah, well thought. Exactly. Yeah, it's actually initially starts from synthesis and then is articulated into 7 subsets of that synthesis. That's a good point. Anyone else?
Yeah, a couple more, and then I'm going to ask Janet to read. And Veronica says, the 3 planetary spirits, are they the spirit synthesis and the spirit of peace and the Lord Buddha?
The 3 planetary, I think it was logoi that he was talking about, wasn't it? Which are the 3 aspects of will, love, wisdom, and active intelligence. I think that was the reference.
And then Sam asks, heads for drawing the human figure.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch. Say that again.
Yeah. Sam, can you please explain the 8 heads for?
Oh, no. I just put the comment because I'm an artist. I draw and paint because we take 8 heads for the human figure for a male.
Oh,
and
right.
And for a female, we take the 7.5 heads.
Yeah,
That's what I wanted to say. Okay.
Right. What he's saying is that the heroic figure was calculated to be 8 head heights tall, right? I was a professional artist and that I'm very aware of that, even though real human beings are rarely, they're it's less. It's more like 7 to 7.5, right? But thanks for that. Let's see. Yeah. Anyone else?
Okay. Yeah. Hold on just a minute, Janet, because you're going to read. And Veronica says Doriforos equals satellite.
Huh. Okay. Interesting. It's the name of the spear bearer. Wonder what that association is. Huh. Okay.
Go ahead, Janet.
They were also typified as the 3 cyclopes of the sons of the Neronic cycle, who forged the armory of heaven for those who were deemed worthy of the gift, and wrought the thunderbolts of God with which he smite the guilty to the grave. That these cyclopes were Cabri messengers is covertly hinted at by Hesiod, who said that they from immortals grew up, speaking mortals, which alludes to their descent from heaven. They were also called Cotus, Rieris, and Gaias, the great and mighty children sprung from earth and heaven. They were 100-handed, and each one had 50 heads, symbols, these of strength and wisdom. As soon as they were born, they were hidden in a cave.
Okay. Thank you. HPB gives us more insight on the Cyclopes later in the Secret Doctrine. Can we get a reader, please?
Michelle, can you read that for us, please?
It was the belief of entire antiquity, pagan and Christian, that the earliest mankind was a race of giants. Certain excavations in America in mounds and caves have already yielded in isolated cases groups of skeletons of 9 and 12 feet. These belong to the tribes of the early fifth race, now degenerated to an average size of between 5 and 6 feet. But we can easily believe that the Titans and Cyclops of the old really belonged to the fourth Atlantean race, and that all the subsequent legends and allegories found in the Hindu Puranas and the Greek Hesiod and Homer were based on the hazy reminiscences of real Titans, men of a superhuman tremendous physical power which enabled them to defend themselves and hold at bay the gigantic monsters of the Mesozoic and the early Cenozoic times, and of actual Cyclops, three-eyed mortals.
Thank you. And next, reader, please.
Kara, can you read that for us, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All the fables of Greece were built on historical facts. If that history had only passed unadulterated by myths to posterity. The one-eyed Cyclops, the giants, fabled as the sons of Coelus and Terra, 3 in number, according to Hesiod, were the last 3 subraces of the Lemurians, the one eye referring to the wisdom eye, for the 2 front eyes were fully developed as physical organs only in the beginning of the 4th race. The allegory of Ulysses, whose companions were devoured while the king of Ithaca was saved by putting out with a firebrand the eye of Polyphemus, is based upon the psychophysiological atrophy of the 3rd eye.
Interesting. Huh. You see how allegory mixes with physical fact around these cyclops. Okay, next up, the long footnote continues. Could we get a reader, please?
It is owing to the divine perfection of those architectural proportions that the ancients could build these wonders of all the subsequent ages, their fanes, pyramids, cave temples, cromlechs, cairns, altars, proving they had the power of machinery and a knowledge of mechanics to which modern skill is like child's play, in which that skill refers to itself as the works of 100-handed giants. See the Book of God. Modern architects may not altogether have neglected those rules, but they have superadded enough empirical innovations to destroy those just portions. It is Vitruvius who gave to posterity the rules of construction of the Grecian temples erected to the immortal gods, and the 10 books of Marcus Vitruvius Polio on architecture, one in short, who was an initiate, can only be studied esoterically. The Druidical circles, the dolmen, the Temple of India, Egypt, and Greece, the towers of the 127 towns in Europe, which were found Cyclopean in origin by the French Institute, are all the work of initiated priest architects, the descendants of those primarily taught by the sons of God, justly called the builders.
Thank you, BL. Okay. So first, it is owing to the divine perfection of those architectural proportions that the ancients could build those wonders of all the subsequent ages, their fanes and pyramids, cave temples, cromlechs, cairns, altars. Okay, the quote, divine perfection of those architectural proportions refers to the canons of proportions carried forward by the Egyptian and Greek architects, but originally given to the Atlanteans by the Great White Brotherhood. A fane, from the Latin fanum, is a temple or shrine. In Wales, a cromlech, also called a dolmen, is a megalithic tomb, whereas in Brittany, a cromlech is a circle of standing stones. Next, proving they had the power of machinery and a knowledge of mechanics to which modern skill is like a child's play, and which that skill refers to itself as the works of hundred-handed giants. See Book of God, Keneally. So here's Keneally's Book of God. Actually, Theosophy and other alternative sources of the ageless wisdom, such as the writings of Christopher Dunn, describe the methods used to build the great edifices of the ancient world, such as the pyramid, using non-mechanical means under the direct guidance of a master of wisdom. These methods including the use of sound to precisely cut, move, and position the massive stone blocks. This was done using the laws of sacred proportion and geometry, which allowed for alignment with celestial bodies in order to contact and amplify specific spiritual energies, which in turn facilitated various spiritual practices, including initiation. So, if you're an ancient architect / priest, and you want to build a great edifice such as the pyramid, your first purpose would be to create a temple that will amplify certain spiritual energies so that initiation can take place within the confines of those temples. and you use sacred geometry to make that happen. Next, modern architects may not altogether have neglected these rules, but they have superadded enough empirical innovation to destroy those just proportions. Though recognized modern architects such as Frank Gehry, who uses a complex, curved, twisted shapes, and Anton Gaudi, who used organic forms inspired from nature. Though both of these architects are recognized for their aesthetic innovations, they did not necessarily work in accordance with the ageless rules of harmonic proportions. Next, it is Vitruvius who gave to posterity the rules of construction of the Grecian temples erected to the immortal gods, and the 10 books of Marcus Vitruvius Pollio on architecture of one, in short, who was an initiate, can only be studied esoterically. Some modern sacred geometrists have expanded on Vitruvius's work. One of my favorites is Robert Lawler, whose book Sacred Geometry includes a geometrical analysis of the Parthenon as shown here. In fact, it's become quite a popular subject. There's, I would say a dozen significant books written, since the 70s, 60s. There's one book that came out in the 60s that delve into this topic to a great extent. So you see what used to be hidden, by these great masters who built temples and cathedrals has now been made available. Finally, the Druidical circles, the dolmen, temples of India, Egypt, and Greece, the towers, and the 127 towns in Europe which were found quote unquote, Cyclopean in origin by the French Institute, are all the work of initiated priest architects, the descendants of those primarily taught by the sons of God, justly called the builders. So the priest architects, such as the Egyptian Imhotep, ensured that sacred geometry and astrological knowledge was built into the ancient Egyptian structures of his time in such a way that these edifices would facilitate the invocation of the potencies for which the structures were designed. Architecture was not the personal expression of the architect/artist as it is in modern times. Rather, it was a manifestation in stone of a sacred geometrical canon which influenced all who entered the temple grounds. Here are examples of a druidical circle, a dolmen, two temples of India, a temple in Egypt and Greece, one of the many ancient towers that HPB talks about, this one in Sardinia, and one of the many ancient city walls, this one from Norba, Italy. Okay, any thoughts or questions?
Yeah, we have quite a few. Let me see. I'll get to you in a minute, Ariane, okay? Ben says trumpets like the walls of Jericho in the judgment. I think that had to do with one of the images back a ways.
Okay, let me read that comment. Trumpets like the walls of Jericho in the judgment.
Yeah, the advanced technologies using sound to build the pyramids.
Oh, I see. Right. So the destructive would be the opposite, which would be the destructive aspect, but still implemented through sound. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no archaeology that verifies the walls of Jericho.
Right. Yeah. Well.
So it's a metaphor.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so as well. I think it's the idea being that any impediment can be broken through through knowledge of certain occult properties. You know, in this case, the knowledge of sound. You know, there's this whole idea of vril. You know, Jesus said, if you had but faith, you could move a mountain, right? You could move mountains. Well, there's actually an occult science behind that called vril, where you can literally shake things apart, and it completely is reduced to a molecular structure. So, and of course, we have building sounds as well, as before described. Thank you, Ben.
Okay. Yeah. Ariane has a question, but let me do Magda's first, okay? It says cathedral's structure is the human body, two lateral venues, Ida and Pingala, one center main venue, the Shushamna, the round chapel top of the main altar is the head. We are the temple if we attune to those proportions in ourself.
Well said, Magda. Yeah. And, you know, anything we build is going to have it's, even if it's completely unconscious, it's going to have its origin in these the ultimate sacred structure, right? Which would be the human form. Okay. And Ariane.
Go ahead.
Oh gosh, I have so many thoughts. This is so rich. So
That's
for those
right.
of
You
us,
have 1 minute.
those who have had damaged hearing because of loud noises, we know that sound can destroy. But I just wanted to go back to the Cyclops, and this idea that the third eye, the ajna center, deteriorated due to the eyes being developed, the two eyes in the front of the head. So this seems to be related to this idea of art also, that art was impersonal when it was at a higher level. It was, it represented something of the gods. And this form that we have now, which is important, which is the sense of uniqueness or identity, which we evolve into, we're trying to get back to a more impersonal place, to go beyond our individual identities, or even art as like sort of a transformation of negativity, which is not true art. And I just wanted to ask about this blinding of Cyclops, this missive in Odysseus, that was this because modern men weren't using it? They didn't have to use their psychic senses. They had two eyes, and because it's so much louder, it's like louder music, you don't hear the subtler sounds. Or was this because it was sort of like a punishment after like the fall of Atlantis? I'm just wondering how that came about. Is that from lack of use, or was it designed to be that way divinely? I'm just trying to understand it from more points of view.
It's the natural full descent into matter. At the beginning of the third root race, the third eye was still very active because humanity had not yet completely descended into the dense physical, right? As soon as we had the separation of the sexes and procreation, then the higher faculties begin to atrophy. But this is by design, certainly not a punishment. And the design is the development of manas, of the mental principles, as well as of the quality of becoming an individual, which takes place in Leo, before one can then regain a higher recognition and alignment with group consciousness, right, which happens in Aquarius. So there had to be this descent into separativeness in order to develop the individual qualities, and part of that was the atrophying of the third eye. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, like you say, it's a big discussion, but we're out of time, so we'll continue next time. You want to give dates?
Okay, so this is all right. We've got PCF coming up this Friday at 8 p.m. GMT. And then we have the next Secret Teaching of All Ages on the 1st of December, and the next Secret Doctrine on the 15th of December, all of them at 8 p.m. GMT.
Okay, and if you ever wonder what's going on, just go to MoriFederation.com, find the calendar, and it's all listed right there. Okay, thanks very much for attending. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.